Well, hey there, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Faith Roundtable. This is your host, Josh Burtram. I'm also the faithful co host of the Faithful Politics podcast. Happens right here on the same channel. And on both of these podcasts, we try to take deep dives into issues that are current to America, things happening, either theology, politics, the mixture of the two. On Faith Roundtable, of course, we try to talk to people about specifically what's going on with Christianity in America today. And before we jump in, though, I do want to apologize. I have a bit of a cold, so you're going to probably hear my nasaliness, and I apologize for that in advance. But I am very excited to have back on the Faith Roundtable Dr. Brian Dembowczyk. He is a theologian, pastor, and publishing leader, passionate about helping families and churches disciple the next generation. I'm a father of three as well. I totally understand wanting to bring them up in the right way and thinking like, how do I teach them the right things? Like, there's so much out there, right? There's so many influences trying to grab hold of our children's lives. YouTube, I've recently just had this experience of my kids are now wanting a cell phone, right? And they're young. I'm like, did you guys know I didn't get a cell phone until I was like in college? And they're like, what? No way, blah, blah, whatever. And I'm like, man, it's just crazy how old you start feeling. It's weird. All those flashbacks to your dad and all that. But anyway, you always are faced with this issue. There's all these influences coming on your children, and you're, as a parent, at least I think part of what you're supposed to do is help to filter those things. Well, hey there, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Faith Roundtable. This is your host, Josh Burtram. I'm also the faithful co-host of the Faithful Politics podcast. Happens right here on the same channel. And on both of these podcasts, we try to take deep dives into issues that are current to America, things happening, either theology, politics, the mixture of the two. On Faith Roundtable, of course, we try to talk to people about specifically what's going on with Christianity in America today. And before we jump in, though, I do want to apologize. I have a bit of a cold, so you're going to probably hear my nasaliness, and I apologize for that in advance. But I am very excited to have back on the Faith Roundtable Dr. Brian Dembowczyk. He is a theologian, pastor, and publishing leader, passionate about helping families and churches disciple the next generation. He serves as associate publisher for Thomas Nelson Bibles and formerly led the Gospel Project, a curriculum that has helped millions of believers see the Bible as one unified story pointing to Jesus. He's also the author of Faith Foundations, which is what we're going to talk to him about today. I appreciate you coming on, Brian. Thanks. I'll stop the awkward bio just
Thanks,
so we
Josh.
can talk.
Josh, it is great being with you again. And, it's kind of like, it's flattering when you just other books. There's so many. He has written so broadly. There's just too many to list.
Exactly. You're a prolific writer, but I do appreciate your work in trying to do this, this is an interesting area to focus your expertise and time and energy on in terms of family. And, I know that last time we came on, people were able to probably get a sense of who you are, but I'm not going to assume that the people listening now are the same people. There's such flux in this. So I would love if you kind of gave us a deeper sense of who is Brian Dembowczyk and why did you choose to enter into this subject matter of family discipleship?
Yeah, Josh. Well, so I got into this because God led me into it. It sounds like the church answer, but it really is the case. So I was in church ministry as a pastor, pretty much every role but worship. For about 17 years, and then went into publishing. And when I was in publishing, as you mentioned, I was leading a curriculum, the Gospel Project. And part of that role was I was engaging with theologians, trained academic theologians, and said, I had a doctor of ministry at the time and said, it would be really good if I got a PhD in theology to to be a little bit more conversant with these men and women. So I went to seminary and applied and so forth, was accepted. And they said, "Hey, Brian, welcome to seminary. If you want to do a PhD in theology, you're starting from scratch. Your DMin doesn't count for anything. But if you want to do a PhD in ministry, this new thing we have, you're halfway done." And I said, "Well, sign me up." So
there you go. That's so much of life, isn't it?
Isn't it? So I said, "Well, what does a PhD in theology or ministry look like?" And they said, "Well, you can kind of craft your own direction. This is so new and everything." And I think they've actually stopped it. I think it was only a very brief window of time. And so I said, "Well, let me do something with family ministry," and started thinking about it. And so that's what started my dissertation in this. I had a background at the Gospel Project. I was working with kids ministry and so forth. My first ministry in church was family ministry related. So really, I think God just said, "Brian, you can be an okay theologian, but we've got enough theologians running around. We really need some more thought on family ministry and how parents can help disciple their own kids." And so he kindly pushed me in that direction with the degree and then be able to write a couple of books based on the findings. So I'm a father of three. My oldest is now 20.
Nice.
My daughter is 18, and my youngest son is 13. So this is near and dear to my heart as a dad as well, having walked through this and still walking through it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. I'm a father of three as well. I totally understand wanting to bring them up in the right way and thinking like, how do I teach them the right things? Like, there's so much out there, right? There's so many influences trying to grab hold of our children's lives. YouTube. I've recently just had this experience of my kids are now wanting a cell phone, right? And they're young.
Yeah.
I'm like, did you guys know I didn't get a cell phone until I was like in college? And they're like, what? No way, blah, blah, whatever. And I'm like, man, it's just crazy how old you start feeling. It's weird. All those flashbacks to your dad and all that. But anyway, like you always are faced with this issue. There's all these influences coming on your children, and you're, as a parent, at least I think part of what you're supposed to do is help to filter those things in age appropriate ways. And I would love to hear more about the idea of Faith Foundations and where it came from. I'm assuming it's about something like I'm saying, giving us something solid to teach our kids. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Josh, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's been said before. This is not unique to me. It's been said. I don't know who. It's just kind of floating out there. But your kids are being discipled one way or another. The world is discipling them. Yeah. Part of our role as parents is to point them to truth and correct errors and lies and mistruths, whatever you want to call it. That our culture will often teach them and infuse upon them, media and so forth. But we know that the main calling that we're to do is to show them the truth, to disciple them in the truth. And my thinking on this, Josh, is I think most parents in the church understand it's their primary role. Not all of them. I think some parents would reject that and say, no, it's the church's, but it's not a biblical reason. It's more of an expedience. It's, hey, we're not as good as it. Let the church do it. But I think most parents understand this. And I think they want to do it on some level. The problem is it's hard for them to know what to do. And I think this is where we as a church haven't done the best job of giving a clear direction of what is the goal of family discipleship? What are you trying to accomplish with it? And most parents, I think, believe it's just, well, I've got to teach facts about the Bible or facts about Jesus or lead them to believe in Jesus. And all those are important, of course. They're vital. But that's not the goal. The goal is, if we look at scripture, what does it mean to be a disciple? It's to mean a follower of Jesus. It's to be one who lives like Jesus. So as parents, that's our job. Our calling is to come alongside our kids and teach these truths, teach these facts, point them to Jesus so they trust in Jesus. But we don't stop there. We want to help connect the dots and say, what does it look like to live like Jesus in our context? So Faith Foundations is a book of 99 devotions, family devotions, that a family can simply read. It's designed to be plug and play. So if a family's never done family worship before, family devotions, you can just literally open the book and just read and have a successful family worship experience. For parents who are a little bit more comfortable, it provides a template. You can kind of digest it on yourself and add to it, flesh it out as much as you want. But it's designed to be accessible for all parents. And it's built around a catechism. So question and answer teaching format that has been part of the church pretty much since its inception. The Reformation period, it amped it up again. It's kind of fallen away. Our Reformed friends are usually a little bit more familiar with catechism. Reform haven't really heard of it. But a catechism is just a question and answer approach to teach the big ideas of the faith, the big doctrines. And so this is 99 questions and answers based in categories of a section on God the Father, section on Jesus, section on Holy Spirit, salvation, and so forth, these big bucket theology areas. And so each one is built around that. And the thinking here, Josh, is that this gives you the content to start teaching foundations of the faith, thus the name, and gives you a chance to interact with your children and grapple with some of these things and talk through it and use this as a springboard to have follow-up discussions and so forth. And all these foundational truths are designed to be life-changing. So each devotion has a focus on, hey, how can we live this out in our lives this week? So my hope and my prayer is that this is a resource that families, again, even that family who's never done this before, could pick it up, read through it, work through it together as a family, and experience some really fruitful times in God's Word, and then see life change as well.
I appreciate that. You know, when you're talking, I was thinking about. I've been working with my church through theology, and like we've been working through the Bible and what it is, and what like these claims we make about the Bible, like it's inspired, like it's authoritative, like it's sufficient, it's clear, things like this. And working through not only the idea, but also the tensions that you face when you try to understand things that they might encounter on TikTok or in YouTube or in one of these other platforms, you know, the countless platforms that people have that are feeding them information on social media, right? Everything. And I find that so often parents struggle to feel like they can teach theology to their kids. That's not universal. There are certainly parents that do. I know some, and they do it well, and I appreciate that. I try to do that with my kids. I'm not systematic about it, but I try to have a lot of conversations about God, and ideas that they face and all sorts of things. So, but it is rare to find that. And I wonder if you have some thoughts on why it's so rare that we find people teaching theology intentionally to their children, and why it's so intimidating.
Yeah, I think it's because what you're describing, Josh, it's intimidating because most people, even the word theology, even the softer word doctrine can be intimidating, you know, and we start getting, we sit up and get better posture when we hear those words. It's like, oh, these are weighty, important words. And these are, you know, really heavy words. But really when you boil it, so again, I think a lot of parents, maybe most parents would say that's for the trained theologian. That's for the trained pastor. That's for the academic. I've not been trained. I've not been to seminary. I've not been to Bible college. I have my Sunday school group and I've got my Bible, my study Bible. I don't know enough to teach theology. And I think that's a really understandable response. But if we start to redefine and reposition theology and doctrine and say, these are just beliefs about God. So everyone's a theologian. Even the atheist is a theologian, just not a good theologian, because the atheist has beliefs about God.
Right.
So, you know, our parents, they are theologians. Our kids are theologians because there are certain beliefs. So if we start on that level and say, okay, let's not let this be intimidating. Let's make this accessible. What are some things you know about God that are true? Well, God exists. He's loving. He's gracious and so forth. He created. And you can start pretty quickly coming up with a pretty broad list of these are important theological truths that you know. Now, you may not know the fancy words for them, in theology circles, but that's okay. You don't need to know that. It's the truths that matter. And so for us to come alongside parents and give them an on-ramp to experience teaching and talking about theology with their kids in that arena, in that understanding of saying, look, this is not seminary. This is the home where we are diving into these big ideas. Here's the thing, though. I think another reason why parents resist doing this or are afraid of doing this is because they're afraid, what happens when my kid asks me a question I can't answer? So it's like, okay, Brian, this is great.
Ding,
you
ding,
give me a
ding,
script.
Ding, ding.
Yeah.
You just hit the bingo, right? You hit the bingo. That's weird, but you just hit the nail on the head, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's understandable. It's completely understandable that fear. And then some parents will say, wait a minute. So Brian, you want me to ask this question and answer thing? Might that not prompt more questions? And the answer is yes. Yeah. That's one of the beautiful things about a catechism approach is we teach kids it's good to ask questions. And most kids are good with this. Most kids like to ask questions as it is. At some point, I don't know where it is, but we as adults learn this terrible truth or this lie rather, that it's wrong to ask questions or we're afraid to look silly, that we should know something. Questions are a gateway to learning. They are wonderful. Yes. Look at how many questions are through the Bible. Think about some big questions. God asked a question back in Genesis 3 rather. He says, hey, where are you? Now, he knew the answer to that, but he was giving an opportunity for Adam and Eve to come clean. God even asked questions. Questions are a good thing. So we want our kids always knowing it's right and fitting to ask any question. Here's the thing, though. For a parent, I get it. That can be intimidating. We just have to remember this. Our kids don't expect us to know everything. We can't know everything. And so it's okay. It's good when we say we don't know something because we remind our kids we are disciples too. We're on the journey as well. And so the image I would use is not a parent at the finish line turned back around beckoning to his child to come to him or her and say, I've completed it. Come be with me. The image is the parent and the child walking together with the parent maybe a little bit of front, walking together as they're growing and learning together. So it's good with a kid asks, hey, what about this? And a parent says, I don't know. That's a great question. And my encouragement is you followed up with this. Let's try to find that out together. Let's research this together. Let's read the Bible. Let's look online. Let's ask our pastor or so forth. And you grow and learn together. That's a beautiful thing. And so I think those are the two big reasons. It's intimidating and parents are afraid because they know their knowledge is not as expansive as they think it should be.
I mean, I totally understand why people would feel that way. It can be a very intimidating thing. And then you can have a lot of confidence in something that isn't true, that kind of like Dunning-Kruger. I talk about that a lot, but just that idea that you know enough to be dangerous, that the kind of proverb, that proverbial idea, that you know just enough to damage, but not enough to understand how to really apply the wisdom of the discipline. Yeah. Or whatever it is. And I understand why people feel that intimidation and why they feel the way they do. And one thing that's interesting to me about your book is the structure that you have. And what I mean is you go through these big categories: God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, sin, salvation, Bible, Christian living, the church. Is there a specific reason for that order? And the reason I'm asking is that a lot of times pastors will maybe not follow an order. They'll jump around from thing to thing, or it seems like there's an awful lot of the same kind of stuff being said all over the Bible when it seems to be about a lot about me and me like self-actualizing or whatever it is, right? Now, I'm just kind of being a little tongue-in-cheek there, but so I apologize. But is there something specific to that order? Like, why are we doing God before the Bible?
Well, yeah, it's hard. And that's the thing. When we talk about So this would be called systematic theology, where you take these beliefs. And so imagine, if you will, just a room full of individual beliefs. Picture them as little boxes, each box. And you got this room just full of all these beliefs and all these important truths. And a systematic theologian would say, we need to kind of organize this. Type A personality. Let's get some structure so this can be digestible. And so this is wonderful because it starts to find connections and so forth, and starts to make things clear. If this, then why this? And so you start to organize these in these bigger buckets, like you're describing, like God is a pile over here and Jesus is a pile over here in the Bible and so forth. But the problem is you quickly understand they're not clean piles. They overlap. So even when you talk about God, usually you're referring to God the Father, but God, we're Trinitarian, so that includes Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And so there's overlap. One pile starts to fall into another pile. So you can't have, so you start maybe push them closer together, and maybe they even overlap some. And now your piles aren't as distinct. And then you ask, okay, well, which pile should we look at first? And there's a lot of logic in starting with the Bible first, because that's how we can know what we know about God and Jesus' salvation. But then another person might say, yeah, but what about general revelation? So there's an awareness of a God based on what we look and observe. And so maybe God's the better place to start. So it's really hard. I would not say there's a right or wrong order to this. And I think somebody could rightly say, well, Brian, why didn't you start with the Bible? And that would be a good question to ask. I chose this order with God because, again, I wanted to start with, let's get right to the chase, that we are created to have a relationship with God. That's the thing. Like want to have God central. And then once you start talking about God, it makes sense that you're going to talk about Jesus and the Holy Spirit then. And then that would make sense that you're going to lean over to people and sin and then salvation. And so the Bible and then Christian living and the church, that forms kind of like that last triad, is a little bit more of how we live out this relationship, how we can learn about God more and Jesus and the Holy Spirit and salvation through the Bible. And the Bible also helps us understand how to live. So hopefully there's a logical flow to it. But again, as I'm saying, we could have this conversation in another universe where I put the Bible first, and that would have made a lot more sense too.
Sure.
But hopefully, and that's the thing about the catechisms, Josh, they are often designed that one question will naturally lead to another. And so sometimes you'll have one question and the next question will kind of pick up on an idea.
It's more of a logical organization.
Yeah.
Than it is an experiential one, maybe. Or maybe I'm trying to think, like, because when I interact with God, like if I'm thinking as a kid, what's the most important foundational truths, and teaching those, and they don't necessarily have the logical reasoning yet to deal with maybe some of the nuance, right? Like, so with the adults, I'm starting with the Bible because that's under attack so much. People wonder about this stuff. It's, 10 commandments are trying to be put into the, classrooms and public schools. It's becoming like, and what I mean by that, the reason I bring it up is it's, I think, issue of national importance. That people are looking at. I mean, literally Bible training being put into school systems, which we've seen in Texas, I think Louisiana. I may be mistaken on that, but for sure in Oklahoma. And there's been some, there's been some withdrawal, some easing of that. And yet there's certainly still very much people that want that. And I'm not here to argue one way or the other right here, right now. I do have thoughts on it. But my point of bringing it up is that the Bible is something that people don't like they really need to understand. But when it comes to a kid, is that what they need to understand first? Or is it, hey, here's this story and it starts with God, right? In the beginning, God. And it just makes sense. And one question logically leads to the next, right? And the way that you structure it, though, bringing us back, thinking about the book and the way that you structure each individual session, could you describe that a little bit? And then kind of let us know if there is a reasoning behind that you want to bring up? What is that?
Yeah. So, again, Josh, I think you're right. It's so important that we see, and that's the frustration is, and I'm wired this way. I want everything to be in nice, tidy, piles, and it just doesn't work that way. And so as you're working on this and trying to think, okay, what should come first here, and how does it naturally lead to another? It's a challenge. And I would say this, Josh, you were right when you're saying, hey, most kids, they have not developed the logical, critical thinking skills to understand this. But part of this is written for the parents as well. I've already had some parents, this is just released pretty recently, but I've already had some parents reach out to me and say, Brian, I'm learning from this. And I said, I expected that to be the case.
That's great. I love that.
So the logic is really a lot for the parents as well, because I want them to build confidence, like we talked about earlier. I want them to get their arms around this to say, okay, I can figure this out. So the logical structure of the sections, as we've talked about, and then you get to one of the devotions itself, and they all follow the same structure. And that's important because I'm a firm believer in, I want to give that parent the familiarity that once they go through one, they know what to expect every time. And kids need that as well. Kids love that structure. So each one starts with the catechism question and answer. And the suggestion is that you can just read them. You can try to memorize them. A lot of people will memorize catechisms. When we were doing this with my kids when they were younger, we didn't. We just we wanted the ideas. So I don't care if you have the exact literal words, these words are not inspired. I wrote these words. There's nothing holy about them. The ideas under them are what's important. So a family can choose to try to memorize these or not. It's their choice. And then there's always a Bible verse or passage, pericope to read. And often it will have in parentheses a shorter version if you have younger kids. So if you're doing this with a first grader, for example, you might just want to read the shorter one rather than the little bit longer one. And then a devotional thought that can just, again, the parent can read, or if you have older kids who can read, you can have one of the children read that. And then it gets to some questions and answers in the middle of it. And the first question is always one that is trying to just get the prime pumped. And so sometimes the question matters. It's important. Sometimes it's just a fun question. There's no real spiritual weightiness to it. It's just a fun question to get some kind of conversation going in the family. And the second question is always a scale of 1 to 10. And I did this on purpose because I wanted to give avenues for a family to have follow-up discussions about it. So, of course, avoiding all closed questions that answer in a yes or no. But even questions that aren't closed, sometimes we can get a Jesus answer. A kid can be really good at just giving us the answer that they think we expect. So
Absolutely.
a scale kind of breaks that. So for example, I'm looking at the very first one, who is God, the first one. And the question is, how much do you want to follow God's rules? 1, I really, really don't. 10, I really, really do. And the thinking there is you give the child a chance to say, well, I think a 7. And the parent then can say, that's interesting. Why not 8, 9, or 10? What do you think is keeping you? Or they opposite. I think I'm a 3 there. And the parent can say, oh, I don't think you're a 3. What I see from you is higher. And it gives some opportunities for discussion with the family. And then after that, there are always 2 questions that are standing. What questions do you have so far? So that's where it gives this on-ramp for the child just to ask any question. Parents as well. I encourage families, mom, dad, if you have a question, why did God do that? I don't understand, or I don't know who that person was. And then what are you wondering about because of what you've heard? And so that's something that I just really love of having, inviting kids and parents to engage their sanctified imaginations and just really think and wonder about something. Maybe not ask a question, but so for example, if you're talking about creation, I wonder what it was like for Adam when he was there by himself, or, when he's naming the animals in chapter 2, I wonder if all the animals came by in pairs, were they in a line? Just asking these questions. Remember, this is real history that we're talking about. And then you have a Jesus connection. That's where we are connecting this to Jesus. And so we're finding either something he did or some kind of character that is evident about Jesus, and then a prayer, and then a suggested family activity That's not necessarily to be done at that moment, but a follow-up is most likely how it would work well, that you guys can do something during the week to kind of reinforce what you've learned. So that's the structure of devotion, and each one follows that structure.
I really love that structure. I really think that's great. I love the idea of asking questions that then lead to other questions, and then you write those down. I'm just already thinking about with my kids, like getting their questions and then actually addressing them makes it all so much more real in their life when it's like, hey, I actually have questions and they're getting answered. It doesn't make it like, oh, faith is this untouchable thing that I can't, there's so much reverence around it that I can't even approach it. Yeah. It's like the holiness, the idea of like, it's so holy. If I get too close, it's going to incinerate me. So I need to keep some distance, and, I'm not going to touch that religion thing. And yet that doesn't seem to create a kind of stickiness in the faith that lasts. And if you know that you can ask questions and that you can get answers to those questions, that's powerful.
Well, Josh, I mean, what you're talking about is so important, because I think we have got to put an end to this idea of a safe, comfortable faith. And yes, there are things about our faith that are greatly comforting. Yeah. I don't want anybody to mishear me, but there are a lot of tensions in as well. And as we know, life does not work out the way we want it to work out all the time. And so one of the best things we can do for our kids is help them recognize that there are challenges as we're trying to understand who we are and who God is and how things work. There are times it's hard for us to make sense of that. To be really bold, I think parents should admit when they don't like something. As I read through the Old Testament, it makes me uncomfortable to see God at times saying, go wipe out a people group, go wipe out a nation. And now I trust God. I believe he is holy and sovereign and good and loving.
Hard.
But that's hard.
That's a hard one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think we as parents need to let our kids know it's okay to have times where we are not questioning God in judgment, but we are questioning to know and to know better.
Yes. Faith seeking understanding, right?
Exactly. I've got faith, help my faith, that kind of thing of, hey, there are things that I don't know. Well, and that's the other thing is there are certain questions we will never know. We can't fully explain the Trinity. So don't use any of those illustrations. They're all broken. No, the Trinity is not like an egg. It's not like water. It's not like a 3-leaf clover. It's not like a man who has 3 different roles. Those are all wrong. The Trinity is the Trinity. It's God in 3 persons. It's a wonderful mystery that we believe fully and we hold on to, but we cannot answer it. How Jesus was 100% God and 100% Jesus or human. We can't answer that. For our thinking, 2 100% don't add up. And so what we don't want to do is make it seem like there's an answer for everything and everything is neat and orderly and makes sense, because that's not how it really is. And so for us as parents to acknowledge that with our kids, to invite them to experience this as well, and let them know it's okay. And as we do that together, that I think is a beautiful gift that we can give our kids to strengthen their faith.
I mean, I really think that's well said. I want my kids to be able to ask questions. I want them to be able to feel the permission to not have to suppress some of these things that I felt like I did have to suppress. And I've heard many stories that it backfires.
Yeah.
Not every time, right? I'm not trying to say like it's not some algorithm or some equation that happens right perfectly every time. But it's like, it kind of goes like this. Well, I was told creation, 6 days God made the earth. And then I went to high school. And then or my parents kept me home from that and they homeschooled me. That's fine. I totally understand that choice. But then I go to college, and even if I'm in a Christian college, I'm still going to be exposed to ideas just being in that stage of life that are going to challenge those assumptions. And I'm going to be presented with data that I don't know what to do because I've never seen it before. And it's going to feel compelling. And it does. And then they end up believing because, well, if that's not true, then what else about this glass house or this house of cards? What else is not true?
Well, Josh, and let me say this. I think you're rubbing up against something so important here, because it's not only just a matter of what's true, what's not true. I think a lot of times we in the church, let's broaden this, not just parents, we in the church can kind of say, all right, these are the secondary and tertiary doctrines you must hold. Not the prime. We're not talking about primary. We all, let's agree on the primary. Jesus is God and sinless and so forth. Let's talk about secondary, tertiary doctrines. And we start elevating them up and say, hey, if you don't believe these things, you're flat out wrong. You're not a good Christian and so forth. And so you got a kid who might grow up believing that, uh, the creation, 6-day or day age or whatever. That's important, of course. These doctrines, secondary and tertiary, are not unimportant. It's simply they're categorized that because they're not required for salvation. And so the idea is we should be able to disagree on them and still be brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yes.
But when we start creating a narrative that says against that says, oh no, you must believe all these things or else you're wrong. I can see why it's so easy for a kid who gets out, is challenging some of those core beliefs and says, oh, then I'm just giving up, because I'm not a good Christian then. Because I don't know about a 6-day literal creation, which I lean toward a 6-day literal creation. But I also believe this personally. I think you can be saved and we'll be in heaven and we will figure it out together, whether it was a day age or some other. It's not required for salvation. So I think we need to learn a generous orthodoxy where we do not budge on the primary. We do not budge on that first tier, but we learn to be much more generous with the others. And I'm doing this with my oldest son as he's 20. And so he and I have had a lot of conversations. Well, he'll come in and say, hey, Dad, what do you think about this topic? And I'll say, well, I think this. And he'll say, well, I think that. And there's a part of me that wants to start debating and defending my this. And God's kindness, he's really helping me slow down and give permission for my son to believe that. And for me to be okay with that.
I feel like I would want to ask, well, that's interesting. Why do you believe that? I'm really curious. Can you tell me why? And then if he's like, well, my buddy at school, I'm like, why do you believe him? I'm curious. And maybe, I don't know, I don't want to lead, but I would ask the same questions of myself, though. And that's the thing. And he's seen me do that. I try to challenge my assumptions. Of course, I'm not perfect at it. And I'm not even trying or claiming anything, but I do try to be conscious of that, to challenge my own assumptions in front of him, to show that humility. And, those have created some really big moments in our life, but they've also, I think there's a lot of small moments, and I think that's something that you talk about, right? These small moments, big impact. This idea that the iterative process of building something up over time, habitual discipline, it's moving into the place of skill. It's now gone through it's not just an idea. It's now been actualized literally into your brain, and it's like, these are the kinds of things that are so important. They're small, but they have huge impact. Could you help us understand that a little bit, that concept?
Yeah, I think that in my estimation, the sweet spot of family discipleship is what you're describing. I think, these organized times of family worship matter. Very important. And so it's not an either or, to both and. But I really believe the times where we see the faith start to develop and blossom in our kids is when we're having these as you are going moments, as we are just living life, as these questions come up, like we're talking about, as you find discipleship opportunities, as you're, walking through a city and you see a homeless person asking for money, and that prompts a conversation about generosity. It prompts a conversation about what's the right thing to do in those contexts. Is it best just to give money freely, not knowing that person, or, is that? So these kind of questions of how does our faith stretch out into our daily lives, I think is the key. So for us as parents, I think doing the family worship, the regular rhythm of a weekly time where it doesn't have to be long, but some kind of weekly time where we get together and have a family discipleship, worship kind of opportunity. That's important because it gets our context. It gets us thinking more about discipling our kids on a weekend and day in and day out basis as well. And so I think we will see these opportunities because they'll be more front of mind. And then again, if we're creating a context where we're inviting our kids, it's good to ask questions, and I'm not going to judge you. We'll grapple, we'll talk. When you get older kids like I have, you can debate some about these issues, but always you want your child knowing, but I'm not going to be judged. And my parent will give me freedom to grapple and wrestle with my faith, even if they disagree with parts of it. That, I think, keeps that pipeline open. It keeps opportunities. If we kind of are a little bit more oppressive and like, oh no, you can't believe X, Y, Z because I believe A, B, and C, and you need to believe A, B, and C as well. Shouldn't be surprising when our kids stop coming to us with questions and observations and so forth. And so we really want to keep that pipeline open for these daily, as we are going, opportunities.
I'm just so struck about how much this resonates. Like, even just in my own experience with like my son, like I'll have interesting moments. Like he'll say something like that. Wait, we believe that, right? And he's 12 now, and he definitely bucks against us, but he's still, he's an amazing kid. And, he's just got such a bright mind, and I want to be able to foster that curiosity. And actually, I know every parent says this, but all my children really do. They have a curiosity in spiritual things, which I'm thankful for. All three of them in their own unique way. So it's really, really cool. And it makes me think about, I have this struggle with, I send my kids to public school, and I'm totally good with public school. Like I want to support it. My taxes go towards it. Like I'm not going to go into all those reasons now. I certainly can think about it and talk about it if you want, but it's more, I'm bringing it up. Like if I do have a concern, it's about sometimes the curriculum, especially about certain cultural issues where I might find myself, especially in a county that would be further left than me, probably in most of its political leanings. So, and then of course comes all this constellation of cultural issues that come with that. And I want my kids to be in there. I'll be there at their festivals and at the carnival they have at the school and the book fair. And I mean, it's multicultural. It's unbelievable. And the community feeling is amazing.
Yeah.
And yet there is this concern, right? That what are my kids being taught? What influences are pulling them? And how does teaching these core doctrines help navigate these cultural issues or even confusion? Some people might want to say.
Well, and I'd say this before I answer that question more directly, Josh. I would say this. I'm with you. My kids are in public school. I'm a schooling agnostic, meaning I believe there are parents and families who are good to send their kids to public school. I believe it's good to send them to a private Christian school. I believe it's good to homeschool. I think it's a case by case. I don't think there's a one size fits all. And I don't, I just personally, I want to be a little bit more agnostic in terms of, hey, let's give grace to one another. But we likewise chose public school. And the reason is because we want our kids to be exposed with some of these things. Imagine the parent teaching their kid to ride a bicycle the first time. And so you probably done it, Josh. I've done it. And you take the training wheels off. And what do? You usually are running along with that child, right? And you've got your arms out and you're ready to catch the child if he starts to wobble or she starts to wobble. That's what I see this period of time from birth to about 18 is. It's God giving us as parents the opportunity to run with our kids with our arms out there, ready to catch them when they start to wobble in some of these things. Once they leave the home, we can't do that. We still have a relationship with them, but it's nowhere near as closely integrated. And so I want my kids to rub shoulders with some of these things and have questions when I'm there with my arms out and my wife is there with her arms out.
Yes.
And so as we're doing that, though, to answer your question, it's the old story of the Secret Service being trained to recognize a counterfeit, that they are not trained to recognize all the counterfeits in existence. You can't do that. They're trained to learn the real thing. And when you recognize the real thing, you can then know any counterfeit because it doesn't align. And so that's what we want to do is we come with these big truths and we give them the foundation from which they can understand these things and compare and contrast. And again, that's why I think it's so important that we get to Jesus. It's not just these ideas. It's we have been made to in God's image to reflect him in certain ways as image bearers, and that's true of all people. And then when we're made new in Christ, we actually are empowered through the Holy Spirit to live that out to a greater degree. So even the lost person can image God somewhat. They don't do it for the right motivation, but they can image somewhat. But then in Christ, we're able to do this more. And how do we know what that's to look like? Well, Jesus being the perfect image of God, being God himself, presents to us the perfect human. So we imitate his perfect humanity, not his divinity, but his perfect humanity. So when we hold him up and say, this is what we're after trusting in Jesus for salvation, life change, but then living like him. And we get into the weeds of what does this mean in terms of what we believe? And what does it mean in terms of what we do? Living with kindness and grace and so forth. And so that's the foundation that we're pushing back against. So we see something going haywire in our culture. We see a lot of things going haywire, and we can start processing that through. Hey, are these people living like Jesus? Do they look like Jesus? Are they acting like Jesus? They're very unkind and judgmental. Is that Jesus? And so we can start getting this and always getting back to him with that foundation of truth.
I really appreciate that reminder about what we live in, this culture that is going to it's going to challenge us and our kids, and they are going to have to go out on their own, right? That's what we want. That's what's the ideal, right? And so it's like this idea of I don't know how much you are familiar with Jonathan Haidt and several of his books. I know The Anxious Generation, and he has several other ones. The one I think The Righteous Mind, but he talks about the elephant and the rider, and how the elephant drives so much of us, so much of our decisions. And then the rider just comes along and tries to justify those decisions. And it's like, we want to, part of what he talks about in this, and actually, no, it was the coddling of the American mind, which I got connected to through this one. He's essentially like, hey, we either prepare the child for the road, or we try to prepare the road for the child. And he's like, when you try to prepare the road for the child, that doesn't work. It's exactly what you just said. It's like trying to find every counterfeit. You just can't do it. So what do you have to do? You have to prepare your child for the road that it's going to be rugged and unpredictable, and things are going to happen, and you're going to be sad, and you're going to have to learn how to navigate and adapt in a world that can be scary. But we're going to be here, and we're going to help you, and we're going to support you along the way. You're not doing it alone.
Yeah.
And go ahead if you have a response.
I was going to say that this is at the end of Song of Solomon in chapter 8. We're introduced to what I think a lot of scholars believe it's her brothers. They have the couple line. It's like 2 verses, I think. And this is my awkward paraphrase of it. We have this little sister. What should we do for her? And it's in the context, it seems, of sexual purity. If she remains pure, and they say, if she's a wall, we will decorate. If she's a door, we will not. We will bar it. And the idea there is these brothers who are caring for her saying, if she proves herself in this time to be disciplined and do what's right, we will celebrate. If not, we will pull in the freedom and restrict to protect her. And I think that's such an important parenting principle. And that's what my wife and I have tried to do is this time, as you're saying, Josh, our goal is to release our kids into this world as a little Christs. We want them to be salt and light in this culture. We need that. And we're to release them. But that doesn't happen when they turn 18 or 21 or 22 after college, whatever the case may be. It's not binary. It's not a switch that we flip. It's coddle, protect, coddle, protect, coddle, protect. Okay, it's time to release. That's one of the worst things we can do. We have not prepared our child. So instead, I think what it is, and not just, talking about theology and teaching these things and talking about these things, but just life skills as well. You don't never teach your kid about money, turns 21, you kick them out of the house and say, have fun learning. You want to give them experiences in that safe environment where they're learning and they can fail. And we want them to fail at times because they're failing in a safe environment and we're there with them.
Right.
And then as they're proving faithful, we give more freedom and more freedom. And the idea is gradually, when you get to the time where they're ready to leave on their own, it's the precisely correct time. It's that everything comes together, and their experience, their maturity, and so forth propels them into the world on their own, and they can thrive in it and live like Christ in their culture. So that's kind of, I think, what we're striving to do as parents.
Again, I think that's really well said. We want to protect our children because it's our responsibility. And yet part of that discipline is to teach them both what to do and what not to do, and to give them freedom, because again, they are going to have freedom. And in our context in America, at 18, they can leave and we can't stop them. So it's like, at that point, it is going to be just like, what is this relationship? What have we developed? What have we built over time? And I just think that's so important. One of the things that you bring out that I want to make sure we get in before our time is up is the idea of wonder and curiosity. I would love for you to talk about the roles of wonder and curiosity in a child's development and in their spiritual development, and why it's so important.
Well, let me answer that in a second, but I need to double click on something you just said because it was so important.
Please.
That when our kids are released into the world, our relationship with them, of course, doesn't end. And part of what we should aspire to do is parent our kids to the point where they continue not to come back to rely on us, because we need that clean break. They need to be on their own, of course, but they know we're always there for them, and we maintain an ongoing relationship of discipleship. I would say, just like the Bible instructs the kids to honor the parents, and there's no expiration on that. I'm 53. I'm still called to honor my parents. There's no ending to that. Conversely, I think a parent is always discipling their kid. It just changes what that looks like, of course. So that's something I think a goal for us to keep in mind as parents. So wonder and curiosity is so important because God has given our kids this wonderful gift of that when they're young, especially. And sometimes, again, our culture drives it out of them. You need to be serious and so forth. And we want to fight against that. We want wonder and curiosity to be a permanent part of our kids' lives and our lives, because that's the hunger that drives us toward the food of understanding. And in terms of Christ and our faith, we never want those to be exhausted. So just a quick example of this. Think about Christmas time, and you have the same Luke passage, and it's going to be read in churches and so forth. Kids are going to be going to Sunday school. Adults are going to be going to Sunday school in small groups, and they're going to get, well, we've known this before. How many times have we talked about this? That is evidence of a waning wonder and curiosity, because we should never really exhaust. I mean, when you think about God, the Son, stepping into his creation, being wrapped in human skin as a baby, as a literal baby, it's mind-blowing. And so the problem is we stop wonder and curiosity. Oh, we got our arms around this. We understand. And we really don't. And it stunts our growth. It stunts our faith at times. And so we want to keep that wonder. We want to keep that curiosity as this engine that's going to continue driving us toward wanting to know more and exploring more and thinking more deeply about the things of the faith.
And I think that's so good. And I appreciate you so much coming on and sharing with me. I have one last question for parents who are out there, even pastors. So maybe it's kind of a double loaded question, or double barreled question, is the idea of like, what can churches do with the material? Like, how can a church implement this? And then connected with that, once a parent has this material, what are the next steps? And what would your call to action be for them?
Yeah. So take it you're talking about faith foundations with that content. Yeah, I would love for churches to understand the value of this. And you know what, Josh, let's be honest. If it's not this, there are other great contents out there as well. There's some good family discipleship materials out there. And so I would love for churches to curate a library of these kind of resources, either if they can afford it, to have physical copies of them. If they can't afford it, then a website or something where they can point their parents to these tools and make them available. And in the home, if a family has not discipled at all, has never had a family worship time, again, I hope this could be a plug and play resource that you can take and read and just do and start building on small wins and celebrate those small wins. And that's the thing. I'd want parents to know this. If you've never done a family worship and you do one, that's a huge win. Celebrate that win. And to start building a habit of having family worship times and do what we've been talking about, Josh, starting to create a context in your home where we talk about our faith, where we learn about our faith together, we're growing together, and start that. So that would be my hope. In 99 devotions, if you do one a week, that's 2 years or so worth of content. And
great.
From there, I would say springboard, there are other materials out there. This would just be what I would hope would be the start to continue something in perpetuity.
I think that's really, really great. Thank you so much, Brian, for coming on here. How can people follow you and connect with you if you want to share that?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Really enjoy our time together. So my website is briandembo.com, BrianDembo.com. I did not spell my whole last name because nobody would ever find that website. And all the social media links are on there to @BrianDembo is my X or Twitter handle, whatever you want to call it these days. And some other social media links are on briandembo.com as well.
Well, thank you so much. And we're going to put all that stuff into the show notes. And again, it's always a pleasure, Brian. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Josh. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And to our viewers, guys, thanks for joining us. And our listeners, we're starting to put these out on Spotify. So make sure you guys are tuning in and getting these podcasts, sharing them with people that need to hear it. We want this material to get out to more and more people. We need critical thinking and deep conversation during this time more than ever. Make sure you like, subscribe, do that stuff that helps us out. And until next time, guys, take care. God bless.